Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today we've got something a bit special. As I'm part of the Daybreak Content Creator Program, I get early access to Modern Horizons 3, which means I'm going to be playing some Modern Horizons 3 for you right now. The plan for today is rather than playing a single league with the same deck playing 5 games, we're going to sort of mix and match between decks. We're going to get a little sampler of the decks that are available in Legacy and how they're going to be changing with Modern Horizons. And I thought I'd start that off with this particular brew. This is a blue-white Phyrexian Dreadnought deck. So Bant Dreadnought has been a thing for quite a while, and people are, putting their Uros in and stuff like that. And recently when I've played it, I've always thought to myself, I wish I could just play blue-white instead of having this mana base that's a little bit sketchier. And what this deck does is it's found a new thing to put in off of the same tricks, like your Stifles, your Doorkeeper Thrulls, and your Dress Downs. And that is Nulldrifter. So this is a 7 mana 4/4. When you cast this spell, draw 2 cards. It's got Flying and Annihilator 1, but you can evoke it for 2 and a blue. So what we're going to be doing here is if we have Dress Down in play and we evoke this, we draw 2 cards, then this comes into play, we get no evoke trigger, so we just have a 4/4 flyer with Annihilator 1. That is a pretty powerful thing to do. Also, the same happens with Doorkeeper Thrull, and we can stifle the Enter the Battlefield trigger too. So this is kind of to go alongside our Phyrexian Dreadnought. So we've got 8 cards that want to work off of these 10 cards that enable them. And that's kind of the main thrust of the deck. We've got interaction in the form of Force of Will, Dazes, and Plows, as you'd expect. A couple of Murktide Regents, just as a good threat that we can just play without having to set it up. And we've got cantrips to help set everything up. Pretty straightforward. There's a 4-pack of Wastelands in here. We've managed to fit in a Mystic Sanctuary and a Meticulous Archive because we are only playing 2 colours, which is quite exciting to me. We've got Trip Tundra, 2 islands, and plains. I think this might be the new direction that the Dreadnought decks end up going, although I have seen some speculation about Jeskai Dreadnought, but we'll get to that later perhaps if there's time, but we'll see. Sideboard wise, we've just got the normal sort of tools you'd expect here, but with one new card from Modern Horizons 3. This is Vexing Bauble. Whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana has been to cast it, counter that spell, we can pay 1 and sack this to draw a card. So this can stop some of the combo decks playing out a bunch of 0-drops. It can stop 8 cards from playing out a bunch of stuff. It's just a really powerful tool that you're probably going to see quite a lot in this little mix-up of decks I'm playing today. So what I'm going to do, we're just going to jump into some games against some other people on the early access. I don't know what they're going to be playing. And we'll probably play a couple of matches with this deck and then we'll swap to something else. So I'm trying to do maybe 6 matches today with 3 different decks. And I'm going to do the same tomorrow as well instead of my midweek meta deck slot. It's just going to be, let's have a look at the meta going forward. So strap in and we'll do a deck tech before we swap decks. Like and subscribe and let's get Modern Horizons 3 Legacy mode. All right. We're into the first round. I just need to reset some of my settings. There we go. So our opening hand is, this is a Wasteland. Sorry about the alternate art. I tried to get rid of that, but it didn't work. But we've got kind of our combo set up, so I will keep this. We can do Meticulous Archive into Tundra, Dress Down, and then stick a massive Nulldrifter. All right, so I'll play this Meticulous Archive. A little look-see. Source to Plowshares. I'm going to put that on top of my library. It's the sort of thing that is useful in a lot of matchups. Right, Cavern of Souls on Goblin. Hardly a surprise, given our opponent's love of the old goblins. So we have this Plow on top. I'm more than happy to fire that off. So I think I'm playing out the Tundra here. And holding up a Brainstorm if we have an emergency Brainstorm. One downside with the Nulldrifter is that it is not actually... Oh no, is this one... No, it's colourless rather than being blue, even though you pay blue mana for it. It doesn't have Devoid, it's just colourless because it's a 7-drop colourless card. A Bloodstained Mire from our opponent. An Ether Vial. Is this what I'm interested in doing anything about? Are we going to Brainstorm this turn anyway, is the question. I think the answer to that is yes. So I think we're going to Brainstorm now in response, just in case we have something like a... I don't really want to fire off a Daze, though. I was going to say, just in case we have a Daze. I guess we can still fire off a Daze here, and then play a Dress Down next turn. But if we fire off a Daze, it's just going to go straight into the Bloodstained Mire, and I'm not really about that. So I think we put a couple of lands on top, and then we can shuffle away next turn off of that Windswept Heath. And hopefully Dress Down into Nulldrifter will do a lot of the work that we require it to. Play this Windswept Heath. And we will pass. I did set the nice versions of all of these lands rather than the weird ones. But it seems to have reset it once getting into a game. Alright, we've got this Raucous Theatre popping off over there for our opponent, getting a little bit of surveil action. Alright, so their Vial's going to tick up. We don't have another Surveil land. We've just got one Surveil land and one Mystic Sanctuary. Alright, so we're going to see some sort of uncounterable goblin here. A goblin matron. Sure. Like, we could dress this down, but we want to get our Nulldrifter in because this is how we're actually going to win the game. And then we can worry about things after that. If we find another fetch land, we can go and get this plow back. What is our opponent going to reveal to us? A lackey. So this is something they can put in off of the Ether Vial. And it can do some work for them. So we'll crack this. We're probably getting just another Tundra here. I'm not really bothered about our lands at the moment. Just make sure we can cast all our spells as easily as possible. A Ponder. That's not a bad one to find. Okay. So I think we play out the Wasteland. And then we cast this. Because that way we can find the... We're always casting this turn. And this gives us the ability to draw in something like a Plow. So let's draw 2 cards. A Murktide Regent. That's large. That is large. But what are we doing with the rest of our mana? I think we are pondering since we didn't find the Plow. We can't really find anything good off of this, to be honest. That's pretty good, isn't it? I suppose. So we can... Next turn, just assemble a whole lot more friends for our opponent to have to worry about. And the Lackey is unlikely to be able to attack into this Nulldrifter profitably, but it's certainly possible. But next turn, we get to Nulldrifter, Dreadnought at the same time, which is pretty good. So we'll do it with our attack first, get the Annihilator 1 trigger pop in, and sort of carry on from there. Like, there could be some interesting goblins on the way. There's the new 3-mana 3/3 that can ping to deal 3 as you choose across creatures. So they could attack with a Lackey and then get the trade here. But that'd be 2 for 1-ing, and I'd be okay with that trade because we're about to dump 2 massive creatures into play with a Murktide to follow up. We're just playing sort of battle cruiser haymakers over here, just throwing it all down. 4 mana. An uncounterable Goblin Ringleader. Well, we're not interacting with it. This Daze is doing absolutely nothing for us. Matron, Lackey, Ringleader, Vandal. Yeah, the old draw 4 on a 2/2 body. Not too shabby. So this Masked Vandal, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. So they can put this in and blow up our dress down in response to something we're doing here. Alright, they didn't attack though, because they could have put the Lackey into the graveyard to do that. Because they got 2 caverns, there's certainly no point Wasteland in here. We do want to shuffle because we want the card underneath this. Let's crack this first. We're not going to play the dress down straight away. Are we going to put this... If we get this Mystic Sanctuary in play, we can put this Swords to Plowshares on top of our library. That's pretty good. Oh, I need to pop out this thing so you can see all the cards properly. There we go. I would very much like to have this Mystic Sanctuary. Let's get our Annihilator 1 trigger. The issue with this... Actually, the Masked Vandal won't do anything in the face of our dress down anyway. But it can just blow up our Dreadnought down the line. So sacrifice the Matron. They're not blocking here, taking a big chunk for 4. So I think we are looking at playing a dress down here. We're just going to play another Nulldrifter rather than the Dreadnought that can get killed by the Vandal. I'm enjoying playing these giant monsters, that's for sure. Okay, so next turn we've got double Wasteland, Plow, Murktide Regent, whatever we want really. And we can Daze back our Mystic Sanctuary to rebuy Plows. So we can just cast our Nulldrifter into more Plows. A little bit worried about some sort of Muxus action, but I don't believe our opponent's running any mana acceleration to get Muxus next turn. So hopefully we can then attack their mana base with our Wastelands and sort of end that proposition. It didn't put anything in. That doesn't really surprise me. They'd be just putting in a Masked Vandal as a 1/3 that is also a Goblin, which isn't really where they want to be, I don't think. I do like the Masked Vandal tech. It's pretty cool. Oh, they do have an Ancient Tomb, so we could be seeing a Muxus this turn. That could be terrible news for us. But holding up a Plow here isn't going to have changed our opponent being able to Muxus there. And we didn't get the second Wasteland until after we got the cards off the Nulldrifter, so it's not as if we could have played differently and tried to double Wasteland them. We do have access to double Plow next turn, where we can Daze our own spell and pay. And then get back our Mystic Sanctuary. Alright, so our opponent's beginning with an Aether Vial. To put in Goblin Matron. I assume we're about to see a Muxus right in our face. We need to hope it's not good. Okay, Battlecry Goblin. That's a different thing to what I was expecting. Like, they do have a lot of guys. Alright, so here's the Battlecry Goblin. We're going to see a pump here. I believe we are. They have 2 lackeys. So the lackey is definitely going to connect. Which means we're supposed to block the Battlecry Goblin here, rather than the lackeys. Although, Ringleader off of 1 lackey into... Oh, we're in a tough spot. Like, we can block this to save more damage and get this off the board, but we're going to plow it anyway. We can stop this, they can't Ringleader into another threat, which I think is what we have to do here. Holding up the plow here could have been quite useful. But I'm not feeling great about this. We go to 7. And then they put in... Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... This sacrifice another. Sacrifice a goblin. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So our opponent has lethal, provided we don't get to untap. If we get to untap, we can plow and get around it. We'll see if our opponent just wants to drain us out. Yep, they're just going to drain us out for the whole lot here, and I think that's pretty reasonable. Let's go to sideboarding. Oh wow, that's a weird layout, isn't it? Let's change this up. So, Hydroblast looks excellent here. Grafdigger's Cage is good against just Muxus, and that's not really what this is about anymore. So I don't think we need this. The Containment Priest is good against Muxus, as well as being good against the Vial. So Containment Priest feels like a good shout here, as do these Prismatic Endings. I'm not really sure we're going to be doing Force of Will type stuff against our opponent here. So these are the areas I'm looking to trim. But we do get to keep 2 of them back. It's probably just a couple of Force of Wills, so our opponent's going to play around Daze anyway. Doorkeeper Thrull also very good in this matchup if we can actually get into play. I think with this build, you have to run 3 Thrulls and 4 Dress Downs rather than the other way around, because you need the blue card count, because one of our main threats isn't blue. This looks alright to me. Am I worried about Blood Moons? Not enormously. Like, we can play around them, just go get an island. And the plains early on, and we should be okay. Sure. We're ready to go back in. Right, we're on the play. We've got a plow. That's something I'm very interested in having here. We've got Stifle, which does do some relevant things here. We've got Ponder to sort of dig a bit more. I like this one. We're going to need to find a threat, but we've kind of got half of a good threat. So we will just fetch up a... this is a slightly difficult situation. If we fetch up the Tundra and miss, we are susceptible to Wasteland just completely bodying us. But we do want to be able to cast our plow. But are we going to win this game if we don't find another land? Probably not. So I'm going to get an island here. It also allows us to play around Blood Moon if that's the thing our opponent thinks is worthwhile. I think this is in any order in shuffle. It's not a white land here. Alright, we found the white land. Now we can ponder and plow next turn. So we don't have to worry about Goblin Lackey. An Aether Vial. Sure. We can stifle an Aether Vial activation, but we're probably better off stifling like a Muxus trigger or something like that. A Prismatic Ending. I will very much Prismatic Ending our opponent's Vial here. Like, this just gives them so much extra freedom in how they play the game. Containment Priest. You would have been good after, but we have got rid of their... I think we're just going to shuffle this again as well. I don't really want those cards. Right, another Wasteland. Wouldn't mind a Brainstorm to put some stuff back. Okay, we're going to lose our white source. Yep. So we can't plow anything now. A Skirk Prospector. We can play out this Wasteland. We can put a Nulldrifter into play next turn with our Dress Down. But our Dress Down's kind of load-bearing here because we need it to stop our opponent's shenanigans as well as make our things work. Okay, this is quite a smart move from our opponent here. If they don't tap this Wasteland, we can't put in a Dress Down because they know they can just get rid of this Nulldrifter by wastelanding our Wasteland. We tap it for mana, so we kind of need them to tap it for mana. But if we're just facing down a Skirk Prospector while they're holding up the Wasteland, we can afford to draw a few more cards and set ourselves up for later. If we draw a land, then we can obviously have enough mana there but for the turn after. But right now, if we play this, we're just going to get Wastelanded here, so we don't get to make the Nulldrifter. It's a really heads-up play from our opponent. That's what you expect from one of the masters of playing goblins. A Murktide Regent. Okay, I'll play another Wasteland. Let's see if our opponent wants to commit their Wasteland to anything. We're just going to sort of sit at this parity for a little bit. Bloodstained Mire. Like, we could roll the dice and see if we find a land off of 2 draws. But if we're only taking 1 a turn, I think we can afford to play slightly slower. We don't need to be rushing out to play all of our spells. Okay. I'm alright to do the dress down now because we're going to need to find a white source at some point, otherwise we will lose this game probably. But we at least have a backup way to put our scary things into play. So in comes a Scope Prospector. It's managed to do quite a bit of damage to me now. 3 damages from their 1-drop. Right, so I will fire off this dress down now. See if our opponent wants to Wasteland our Wasteland. Right, they're cracking. Now they can play around Stifle. Yeah, so they are doing the play that we mentioned before. There's no point us firing it off with no targets. We do need to find a land off of this draw or our next draw. That's not a land. That's also not a land. So I think we're going to Brainstorm, see if we can hit a Dreadnought. Did not hit a Dreadnought. Right, but we do have a white source now that we can do some stuff with. We're not going to need a second Murktide here, so that can go. I like having many Swords to Plowshares, though. Is the Stifle where I want to be? It's certainly useful. Certainly a card that has some positive applications. Do we need this Ponder? We could always... We're probably good cracking our Flooded Strand, though. Ponder can certainly help us out in a pinch. I think we just want to keep the interaction up, though. So maybe it's the Murktide that goes here. We just get rid of them both. And have a Ponder to refuel with later. Well, not so much refuel as find the right thing we're looking for. So we've got a Doorkeeper Thrull we can flash in to stop our opponent having something scary. We can also get a basic planes off of this Flooded Strand, which is very nice for what we're trying to accomplish. Are we blocking this Skirt Prospector with our Doorkeeper Thrull? I don't think so. Okay, our opponent's not about that either. Let's crack this, get our basic planes. Jam the Doorkeeper Thrull at end step. So they have removal, they can kill our Doorkeeper Thrull in response to us casting a Nulldrifter. Which is a little bit rude, but fair enough. So we're going to leave this up, and we're going to evoke this. So we get to draw 2 cards. There's a Dreadnought. Get to play the Nulldrifter. We can crack this. They didn't answer our creature response. Do I want another white source so we can double plow? I think so. Let's get this. We'll jam a big Dreadnought. And now we've got an awful lot of power. I'm keeping back the Doorkeeper Thrull this turn in case anything weird happens. Being able to block some sort of hasty lackey. Alright, our opponent's had enough. Let's go back to the sideboard. Do we want to do anything differently this time around? I don't think so. I think we've boarded in the correct things and I don't want to go back into Dazes. Like Daze versus Force of Will is a weird one, especially on the draw. We definitely aren't going to want these Dazes when we've got the Forces in. I think we're just going to see if we can remove our opponent's things. Should be noted that this deck is running Prismatic Ending only in the sideboard because we're not really generating more than 2 colours for it. But we can use it to blow up a Blood Moon. And it is just removal for 1 and 2 drops when that's relevant. What about this hand? I'm very unhappy with this Mystic Sanctuary. That's for sure. I don't really like having double Nulldrifter either. I think we can do better than this. I think... like, there's too many awkward things. Alright, this looks a lot nicer to me. We have to make a choice about what we're keeping here. So we're obviously keeping all of these spells. And we're keeping some amount of lands here. Are we getting rid of the Nulldrifter? Or are we getting rid of the Meticulous Archive? That's a kind of... I guess if we've been off the Archive, we can always go find it again later. We're probably going to be wanting to fetch basics rather than playing our Archive out anyway. Are we going to need a turn 1 Swords to Plowshares? If they play Vial, I think we have to counterspell this one because it's just such a big mana bonus for our opponent and getting to play around in awkward timings for us. And that could be the thing that made their hand good as well. Right, so we can play this out. We could get a Meticulous Archive or we could try and play cautiously around potential Blood Moons. That's a choice we have to make. I also don't want to get Wastelanded, so I'm going to keep this up and get a pair of basics off of our 2 Flooded Strands. A Brainstorm. That's a great Magic the Gathering card to see right now. Because this Nulldrifter and Wasteland are unlikely to do very much in this matchup. Like maybe a Wasteland can take out a Cavern at a critical moment, or keep them off of mana for Muxus for a turn or two, which is certainly something. Alright, they are fetching into it, which is pretty cool for us, but I think we want to just get this Nulldrifter online. If you're not familiar with what this is referencing as well, there's a card called Nulldrifter from Lorwyn that is the same as this, except it's just a 2/2 flyer without any of the other stuff, and it costs 4 and a blue. But it was pretty much everyone's favourite card from Lorwyn. It was just great. And it's nice to see a little throwback to that also is pretty legacy playable in my opinion, as you can tell. Opponent's thinking long and hard about this Surveil. They left it on top. So we can respond to any spell they play with a Brainstorm if we think it's appropriate. Otherwise we can just end of turn, fetch an island, Brainstorm, and then... Okay, so they have a Goblin Lackey. That's going to get plowed. A Boggart Bog. This is the new card from Modern Horizons 3. It's either a land or it's a goblin that removes graveyards. This card is exceptionally good. So let's go and get our basic island. Let's cast a cheeky little Brainstorm. Okay, I think... I do want to plow this at end step, I think. I think that means we're putting back these two. And we're just going to try and get the Dreadnought doing its thing. We want to fetch on basics here. So we get this Plains. Nap off a plow on the Lackey. Can't be dealing with that. And if we find a land here, we can immediately make the Dreadnought. The one issue here is if our opponent has a Red Blast, that leaves us a little bit cold. I think it's worth moving the game forward here to try this out. Red Blast is pretty bad for us here. They can also do it after this is in play, but at least it's only going to be like a 1-for-1. Oh wow, we're just in with the Dreadnought. Okay, so no Red Blast. Now they might have ways of dealing with the Dreadnought, things like Trash Master, which can sacrifice goblins to blow up artifacts. But we're in a pretty solid position here. We answered our opponent's first 2 plays. The thing they can get us now is if they just get up to Muxus mana with like an Ancient Tomb next turn. Okay, Trash Master, that's a pretty good one. This can just trade 1-for-1 with the Dreadnought. But that's a 4 mana play to trade with the Dreadnought, and I can live with that. Let's see what we find here. A land. So we could jam this Nulldrifter just to draw 2 cards, which I don't hate. Because if we find ourselves a Stifle, we can just Stifle the Nulldrifter trigger here. So I think I'm down for it. This is also card advantage, right? We're just casting a Divination. We get to draw the cards, and this comes into play and we'll die. Unfortunate that we don't get to make more of it, but I think just sitting around doing nothing, waiting to draw the card, isn't as good as where we've got this nice window to actually just draw a couple of cards. A Goblin Ringleader. Let's see what this pings off the top for them. Nothing. A swing and a miss. They did bring in the Red Blast like I thought though. Do I care about this hitting me for 2? Not particularly. Now that can be a problem in future turns. We don't take too much damage, but this plow is not really to be aimed at that sort of body. Okay, so our opponent is getting towards Muxus mana, so I think we have to Wasteland one of these next turn. Let's get a Meticulous Archive and get that Surveil action going. We don't have enough islands to be putting our plow on top using the Mystic Sanctuary. Right, back over to us. Address down. That can be useful for us. Okay, I think we play out the Misty. And we do have to fire off this Wasteland right now. They have 2 black sources, we can't take them off black. They have 2 red sources, can't take them off red, but we can take them off of one of their caverns. And if we find another Wasteland, we can start making their things counterable. But we have Muxus covered with the Dress Down. It's not ideal, but we'll take it. It just turns into a 4/4 that we can just clean up with a plow, and Dress Down replaces itself, so it's not really much of a resource cost for us, although this is an integral card to us actually winning the game. That is a Goblin Lackey. We don't have to plow this now. We can plow this on our opponent's turn. Do we even plow it considering they've got 1 card in hand and we have... Okay, so this allows us to plow and then rebuy it and plow again. It is kind of awkward with this Lackey because if we put the Dress Down in response, they just won't put in the Muxus. So I think we have to plow this now. Just get it going. Because that could just give them Muxus this turn. And if, like I said, if we Dress Down response, they just don't play it. Because we have to play this before the trigger resolves. We're steadily taking more and more damages. So we have a choice between putting Swords to Plowshares on our deck, on top of our deck, or we can put the Brainstorm on top. That is not an easy call. I think we want the Brainstorm. We've already got a dead card in hand. Let's Brainstorm. See what we can rustle up here. Is this a Red Blast? It is a Red Blast. Okay. So that's what's in our opponent's hand. There's no one playing this Flooded Strand out. So the Plow would have been a better line. Maybe they're going to go all the way with this Ringleader. Although we have to work through that Red Blast at some point, and this means it's a Red Blast not pointed at our dress down, so we actually do get to shut off a Muxus or whatever, or put one of our massive creatures into play. Because all of our creatures outclass our opponents at this stage of the game. Muxus is the only thing that outclasses on a 1-for-1 scale. The rest of it is all synergies. Tiger. Okay. Brainstorm. Well, I wanted it last turn, so I'll have it this turn, I suppose. You got another Red Blast? They did not. These cards are bad. We can take the... I don't even know how important the Wasteland is here. I think I would rather have the Stifle at this point. So I think we put these two on top. And then we play this out with the intention of shuffling. Possibly casting this dress down at end step. Because we already have the Stifle that we can use for other things that we were going to use the dress down for anyway. It's getting a little bit dicey for us. Our life total is quite low. There is a Wasteland. A Masked Vandal. That is just a guy. Alright, we go to 4, so this is nearly lethal. I guess we just get the Tundra. It makes it easier for us to cast spells. I think we have to fire this off now just to dig into our deck. Murktide Regent. That is a good Magic the Gathering card. We could stifle our own dress down trigger, so it doesn't sacrifice at the beginning of the end step, to stop them having any creatures with useful abilities off the top. Or we could just say the Stifle to stop their useful abilities, which is probably the correct thing. Oh, we drew the Dreadnought. Wow, so there's trousers. That's useful, isn't it? Let's play the Dreadnought. Let's play the Murktide. Blue, blue. Let's get rid of Force of Will. Swords, Brainstorm, Brainstorm. We just want to make the biggest one we can here. We can't bounce our Mystic Sanctuary anyway, so we're just going to make... Oh, sorry, it only becomes 3/3. What am I talking about? That was a mistake. Sorry. Too concerned about other things. I was going to say, but we can't bounce our Mystic Sanctuary because we don't have any Daze left in our deck. They can't really attack here. Yeah, that was foolish, because if we draw another Murktide, because we have one more in our deck, we could grow this one. That's... Alright, I want to Wasteland that. That's not what I'm stifling. That feels like bait. A Hydroblast. That's a good one. I think we just send in the 12/12 and keep the other guy back on blocks. Even though we have the removal spell and the Stifle. We can't counter stuff with the Hydroblast. We can still use the removal spell against most of the goblins our opponent has the option to play. 3 mana. Goblin Matron. We could just Hydroblast this on the stack. Let's try that. Our opponent's got 1 card in hand. If it's a Pyroblast... Okay, it's not a Pyroblast. Alright, we got the GGs. Alright, so that gave us a 1-0 victory. So that was a 2-1. 1-0 up with this deck. We're going to play one more round with this deck before we try a different one. Right, we're into the second one. What does our hand look like and what does it do? Our opponent, Tony Scapone, is known for playing combo decks. But I don't think our hand is one I would keep against pretty much any decks. Like, we've got some stuff here, but I don't really like it that much. I think we can do better than this. This is definitely worse. Yikes. Okay, this one plays. This one plays a little better. Okay, so we can keep this. We've got a plan. So we want Misty Rainforest and the Ponder. We want the Dress Down and the Nulldrifter. I don't think we want 2 Wastelands. Do we want any Wastelands? I think we do, because it's a mana source, which means we're probably putting back the Plow here. I think we have to fetch a basic. So Tony is mainly a combo player, but does play other decks, and I don't want to disrespect them and try and play around them having a certain archetype, because everyone's trying all sorts of new stuff today as well. I will take this Force of Will and put the Brainstorm underneath it. I do kind of want a second land here is the only issue, but we can just like cantrip Dress Downs for a couple of turns, and that's reasonable. Our opponent is likely to have something that we're going to have to counter and stop it jamming us up at some point. But they could be playing like Vexing Baubles, and then this all suddenly becomes a non-existent card in our hand. Okay. There is an Urza's Saga. Now, our opponent might be doing very unfair things. Our opponent is doing very unfair things with their things. So what we ideally want to see here is an Echo of Eons that we Force of Will, and then we Wasteland this, and then we use the Brainstorm to try and get deeper into our deck and sort of get ahead. That's what we want to happen. But our opponent is a very good Magic the Gathering player, so they're not just going to spew off into a thing unless that's like the only thing that they can do. Okay, there's a Chromox. What is that? Is that Burgy? Alright, a Vexing Bauble. So if we counterspell this, we don't get to counterspell anything else ever again. But if we counterspell this, we lose our ability to have this dress down available. Honestly, that's fine. I don't think countering that makes any sense. So we're probably going to see a new hand of 7 cards in a second as well. There's the Echo of Eons. The Vexing Bauble in the deck, like our opponents, kind of reminds me of when people in Vintage were playing. Well, I don't know if they still do because it's been a long time since I've checked in on that format. But people used to play Chalice in the decks. They play all their Moxes out and then just play their own Chalice. It's kind of the same deal, except you can sack the bauble when you need to. So if we cast this, it'll get countered, so we're just going to draw 7. Alright, we've got not a lot going on, basically. This hand is definitely worse than our previous one. I think our opponent's going to give us the business here. But we've got some Flusterstorms and stuff which can help. There is a Rite of Flame, sure. Hopefully our opponent's got a bunch of zeros they can't do anything with in their hand. Obviously they can just crack the bauble and then play them all. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening now. They've got their defense grid online. So it's kind of just using it as an additional copy of defense grid, which is pretty sweet. There's a Shatterskull Smashing there. Another bauble, sure. Again, I don't think it's worth us counterspelling that. We kind of need some more mana to be working with here. Valley. I would very much like to play this out. And sorry, it's Wasteland. I shouldn't call it Valley of Golgoth. I did try and have the regular lands. But the way it may be important in a deck to go into the practice rooms, obviously undid that. Anyway, moving on. We've managed to take out our opponents as a Saga, which was the way that they were going to be able to win the game easily. They just did that. However, now they're going to have to string something else together, probably more likely on the combo front, but they might have to bin off their own bauble. A Burning Wish that we cannot counterspell because Daze is a free spell when we bounce an island to cast it. So the bauble doing some work here. This was my pick for the number 2 card in Modern Horizons for Legacy. And the number 1 card was basically the double-faced land spells. If you haven't watched that video, you should definitely check it out. I put it out on Saturday, so it's been out for a few days. Certainly seeing the Vexing Bauble doing some work here. It's good because it's a card that can be used like offensively or defensively. Like to stop your opponent's thing or whatever. Okay, so now we can hard cast a Daze. That might be a relevant thing to do. Not that we can do it through a defense grid. But these 2 cards interact really weirdly because this says each spell costs 3 more. So if they have the bauble and this, we can like Force of Will and pay 3. Alright, there is a Saga. Our deck is naturally good against Urza's Saga because we've got Wastelands, we've got Dress Downs. Alright, we are never casting a spell on our opponent's turn. Understood. So much defense. A Ponder. Alright, sign me up for a Ponder. I prefer a Brainstorm, but I'll take it. So this Dress Down is pretty good. Actually, is it? Because it's so expensive to play this and the Nulldrifter at the same time, isn't it? Yeah, I don't think that's the one. We could just take the Ponder here, but I think it's in any order in Shuffle. A Brainstorm. Do I play out this Mystic Sanctuary? It's ugly, and I hate it, but I think we do have to play it out. I feel I'm just completely at the mercy of whatever Tony's about to do to us. So this is the Urza Saga now able to make constructs. The Dress Down is fine to deal with those constructs, but I don't think we wanted to draw that whole pile. Alright, our opponent gets to add 7 mana because of our hand being massive. But Defense Grid plus Wheels will do that. So this is going to be a Echo of Eons straight into the graveyard. Yep, and we're going to draw a fresh 7. 2 Wastelands, so we can stop them tutoring off their Saga, but I don't think this game is really about that Saga. A Jeska's Will, have another 7. That's plenty of mana. There is a Mox Opal. Storm is getting up there as well. Yep, the Vexing Bauble is back. No counterspells Rust. This is probably just going to be a redraw. There it is, the redraw. That Vexing Bauble looking very good right there in our opponent's deck. I think Vexing Bauble is probably the most format warping card for Legacy from Modern Horizons. Okay, Harnfell. So our opponent's going to be able to discard cards, and then they get some cards they can cast this turn. Burning Wish is pretty good as cards go. An Ancient Tomb. A Reforge the Soul. That's quite expensive, but they can do that if they want to. Right, they're just going to Echo Eons again. Our hand isn't really going anywhere. Our opponent just needs a little bit of mana, and then they're good to go. Any cards that don't do mana stuff, they can just chuck into the horn to find some more mana. There's 2 Rite of Flames in there. 3 Rite of Flames. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana. Is that right? And then they Burning Wish. Do they have Tendrils? They've got Lion's Eye Diamond. We'll let our opponent play out, just so we can see it. Many Rite of Flames. There's the LED. Crack this. Yeah, so now they're just going to put the Tendrils on the stack, and we are going to lose. There it is. Okay. Not a surprise. The combo deck smashes out pretty hard there. So Vexing Bauble and Null Rod are pretty strong here. The Force of Negation also looks good. Prismatic Ending has some pretty relevant text on it if our opponent's having to play stuff out ahead of time. Flusterstorm, obviously very good. Hydroblast, our opponent seems quite red-based, so these also seem good. So we have all of this to try and win, to try and do our thing with. Source of Plowshares is clearly one that can go. We do need to actually win the game, which is an important thing to keep track of here. So if we've got this package, what are we trimming from it? So Nulldrifter can just draw cards on its own. It's not the end of the world. Stifle is pretty good against Storm decks, though. It feels like it's a case of we have too many things that are good, but we've already seen that our opponent's going to be trying to deal with all of our free spells. So maybe we're supposed to board out the free spells, as crazy as that might sound. That does sound crazy, doesn't it? Is this a matchup where we have time to be pondering for stuff? Because we can't really ponder into these sorts of spells because our opponent's going to be... I don't like the Dazes, for sure, because they cost too much. I think maybe we can trim down on some ponders. That takes us to 60. Because the problem with ponder here is we might not have the time to set things up, and setting up our free spells isn't always good. But we do need to have our free spells at the same time because our opponent might not always have those pieces. So it's a bit of a tricky one. Maybe we could trim one of our forces, but trim force against the Storm deck does seem a little bit careless. And our Stifles are only good if we can counterspell their things as well, so let's just try it like this. Brave New World with the old Vexing Bauble, already changing how people are playing the game. Mystic Sanctuary is not what I want to see here. We've got 2 of these, but no payoff. I think this is a pretty easy mulligan. This one... we're kind of all in on our Null Rod doing stuff. But it is one of the better cards in the matchup. We have an emergency Brainstorm we can fire off. So I think we're going to keep this. So we're going to bottom a Nulldrifter here. Is it a Nulldrifter or is it a Tundra? I think there's a Tundra actually. We want to keep the Wasteland so we can answer things like as a Saga. Right, so here is our Tundra. We don't have any like 0 mana spells that we can play on our turn, so we can Brainstorm on our opponents when we know the thing we're trying to deal with. Yes, it does add 1 to our opponent's Storm, but that's not really the be-all and end-all. Haywire Might. That doesn't deal with Null Rod. So we could Brainstorm here just to be good with our mana, since we're about to use this fetch anyway. And this Nulldrifter's not doing anything on its own anyway. Okay, I don't really... which one of these is better for us? Or we could keep them all and just throw this land away. This Force of Will doesn't do very much on its own. Because Nulldrifter's not blue. Right, so we're going to draw the Nulldrifter now. We're going to shuffle those away, get ourselves a Tundra. Cast this Null Rod. Can't be killed by Haywire Might because Haywire Might is an artifact. This will shut down a decent chunk of our opponent's deck. But they should still be able to win through it given enough time. So we do need to mount some kind of offensive. Worst case scenario, we can draw 2 cards with Nulldrifter next turn. We're going to tap for 1 by the Haywire Might. That is not a clock I'm worried about. Our opponent didn't play an Urza Saga, so we don't have to spew off our Wasteland into that yet. This is going to be a Burgie. Okay, a Burning Wish. We don't have a blue card because Nulldrifter's not blue. Which is definitely coming up. Let's see what our opponent reveals off of their Burning Wish. Empty the Warrens, you say. That's kind of an interesting one to know about. A Murktide Regent. That is a blue card for Force of Will. I'm down for that. Are we casting this Nulldrifter or are we wastelanding our opponent? If we wasteland our opponent, we can take them off of quite a bit of mana to make the Empty the Warrens harder to deliver. But this leaves us a little bit cold to Urza Saga, which would be the next backup plan they have. But that's a couple of turns away, and our deck is pretty good against them anyway because we have the dress downs. This is a pretty tight call. Do I want to draw 2 cards, or do I want to wasteland our opponent? If we draw 2 cards, if we wasteland now, we might not be able to draw 2 cards next turn at all. That is a tough call. I think I'm going to... If our plan is to counterspell the thing that gets them up to Empty the Warrens mana, I think we have to hit the thing that gives them the most mana here. It's a shame that our Murktide Regent has to get chucked into a Force of Will here. Alright. I'm just going to get pecked down a little bit. Can I please draw a land? A Prismatic Ending. That doesn't really do what we need it to here. I'm not worried about the Haywire Might. And now we don't get to draw from the Nulldrifter now. So our opponent might well be using their Bauble on the turn they're trying to do an empty. So they can play that. But if they play the Bauble and Null Rod's in play, they can never get rid of the Bauble. So there'll be 2 Null Rods effectively. A Defense Grid. We can Prismatic Ending that. Right, so now we don't actually need to do... We don't need to draw a land for next turn. We can just Nulldrifter, sorry. X is 1, blue and white. Yeah, so this should exile the Defense Grid. So we have our Force of Will available. We're looking for Dress Down would be a great draw here. Dress Down into land would be really nice. Faith is looting. You can faithlessly loot. Wasn't expecting to see that in our opponent's list. I suppose it's a way of getting some echoes out of your hand sometimes. Echoing Truth. A Defense Grid. I don't think we can counter that. I think it's better off trying to get a Prismatic Ending. Okay, so we can pay around the Defense Grid, and then we can put the Prismatic Ending on top and use that to exile the Defense Grid next turn. Despite our opponent attacking us every turn, they are below our life total purely due to Ancient Tomb damage. What is this going to be? Jeska's Will. This is going to give them 4 mana. Do I care about this? Is this a bait? Because they can fire this off and then fire off some little ones and get the empty going that way. If this is just a small empty, I don't care that much. A Lotus Petal. That does not activate for mana. This does not activate for mana. This does not activate for mana. They're going to imprint? I doubt it. I was hoping they would cast a Rite of Flame here. Okay, so we're just getting some goblins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we could have hit that Jeska's Will and we would have been in a better spot. So now we need to crack this. Go and get ourselves this Mystic Sanctuary. I'll put this Prismatic Ending on top. Is I better off having a Murktide Regent in play? I think I am, right? We're on 14. So it's a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I think we just have to let this go, and then we're going to make our Murktide Regent. Yep, we take 1 from this. This is 11 damage on board. So if we kill one of these for white, if we kill this for white, that's probably better, isn't it? Let's go Murktide in. So we can block 1, we take 9. This is a bit of an ask, really, isn't it? I think we just should have counted that Jessica's Will. I was definitely thinking about it. We need to kill quite a lot of these creatures. We don't have any plows left. Let's evoke this. Let's have some cards. That doesn't do it. That's us done. Yeah, we misplayed that one. We could have countered that. Jessica's Will, and then they have to wait till they draw some more mana they can play that way. But they were getting close to just being able to pump out all these 0 drops and then play it anyway. So I was kind of worried that our opponent might have been trying to do that sort of line to us anyway, where we just add their storm count up by countering the Jessica's Will. Didn't work out for us that time, and we finished 1-1 with the Dreadnought deck. So time to play a different deck. Alright, the next deck we're going to be playing is what I think has a danger of being one of the more powerful decks in the format now. So Oops All Spells is a very powerful deck that one of the weakest sides of it was the fact that it didn't have a lot of access to early black mana through lands, because you only had just Agadeem's Awakening. So you had to go through some loops playing all the, you know, Wild Canter and the green lands and stuff. That is gone. No longer is that the case, because we have Boggart Trawler and Fell the Profane. So we have 12 black lands in our deck, and then we also have like our Chrome Moxes, our Lotus Petals, Dark Rituals as per usual. So I think this deck gets a lot better now. So the way this deck works is we play Undercity Informer or Balustrade Spy, which targets us and mills us until it hits a land. These are not lands on the front side, so we mill our entire deck over. 4 Narcomoebas jump out the graveyard. We dread return, sacrificing them to Thassa's Oracle. Sometimes we will use this Cabal Therapy to make sure the way is clear. So that's basically what the deck does. We've got 8 pieces of Disruption here. We also have the ability to entomb one of these creatures and then just reanimate it, and we can do the same thing that way. So we have more lines, so we're more reliable now. And we can also just do like Entomb, Reanimate, Grief, and sort of play that line if we have to. So this is kind of what I've cooked up. I think a lot of people are probably going to come up with almost the exact same list because it's pretty much builds itself. Whether all this works out being the best Oops All Spells list, we'll see. But something along these lines I would not be surprised to see being pretty stock moving forward. Sideboard-wise, we have Protection for Graveyard Hate that targets us. We have Leyline of Anticipation. So if people are playing Vexing Bauble, we can play this, and then we can just go in our opponent's upkeep before they get to play it. Then, I wasn't really sure what to fill the last slots with, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I had 4 Daphne Voidwalker and 3 Barrogoyf, because everyone wants to see new cards. So Barrogoyf is one of my favourite new cards. It's just Tarmogoyf, but with loads of extra stuff. It's got Death Touch, it's got Lifelink, and it also mills you and draws you one of those cards you milled if it's a creature. And also, the way this is worded, I believe, even if you've got a Leyline against you, this will mill you cards and still put the creature into your hand. So the plan is, sometimes Hexing Bauble might be a problem. If our opponent's just got too much graveyard hate, like Ley Lines and Baubles and all sorts, maybe we board into this, and our opponent's going to mulligan low to get their little bits and pieces, and maybe try and beat them down with, like, Grief, Daphne Voidwalker, Barrogoyf, you know, like a sort of bad scam deck. If our opponent's mulligan really heavily to find the pieces, maybe that's good enough. So yeah, that's the deck. I imagine these 2 games I'm playing might be very quick. So strap in, let's go. Okay. So, we're into a game with the old Oops deck. Our hand doesn't do the things we want it to do, so we're going to mulligan. What about now? This hand also doesn't do the thing we need it to do. So this is going to be thrown back as well. Alright, what does this do? We play this, we play this, we play this. This is a turn 1 kill. We keep these 4 cards. So we get rid of... Oh, we only have to get rid of 2 cards. Wowzers. So our opponent can turn 1 us, and that's pretty annoying for us. But that is the nature of playing a deck like ours against some other decks. But if they cast Echo Beyonds, it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to get to, you know, carry on going. They might just reset our hand, and we have a lot more reliability than we used to with Oops All Spells decks. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out. This isn't necessarily the ideal matchup, because both decks can kind of goldfish each other pretty hard. So this might be a very quick round. But it was always going to be quick when we started playing Oops All Spells, wasn't it? But I think it's important to showcase how important these lands are to the format and how it's going to really empower some decks. Like, you can play Belcher decks of any colour with loads of lands in now, because there's now 12 of each colour of these come into play untapped lands, which is kind of ridiculous. Let's see what our opponent's mulligan to. We can do this as many ways as we like here. Is it better to... we get to Thoughtseize as well here, right? No, we don't have the reanimate. What am I talking about? We don't get to do that. We just have to get our Dark Ritual going. Cast a Balustrade Spy. Alright, our opponent's conceding because they know what's about to happen. Sideboard wise, I don't know what our opponent's going to do here. I like the ley line of anticipation because they're probably not running counter magic. So I think we want these ley lines, and that means we're probably boarding out the Thoughtseizes. And we could have the ley lines instead of griefs. That is an option we're allowed to do. Do I think our opponent's going to be playing hand... like, they're going to be trying to combo us with tendrils and stuff anyway. So this will help against that and maybe make some of their hands not function as easily. Part of me would like to have access to Grief Reanimate Grief in our deck. But I think we want to see if this... I guess... We're basically just trying to reanimate our Balustrade Spy instead here. If our opponent does have ley lines, how are we beating ley lines? I don't know what our opponent's got. So there is an argument for having this sort of stuff, and maybe we get rid of some of this package. So we could get rid of, like, these things. And maybe we'll trim on some Entombs. Or we could trim on all the Entombs, have some Griefs back in, because we can at least cast the Griefs. And then we've got one Reanimate here. Do we want another Reanimate? I don't think so. Then we're just going to roll in like this. They're probably not killing our creatures, actually, so we can probably get a second Reanimate in over the bridge. We have kind of made it harder for us to do our Entomb line hits here if we want to do that. So we have these Reanimates purely for this. Yeah, this is a tough one. Are we supposed to keep the Entombs or not? We can always do 1 and 1. That kind of feels like the worst of both worlds, though, doesn't it? Yeah, we just have the Reanimates in case we need to play some sort of different sort of game where we can maybe reanimate our opponent's own creatures, because these can flex into, like, bringing back our opponent's Burgie and stuff. Ideally, we just want to have Ley Line of Anticipation in play and just go. So, what do we have here? We have this. This doesn't make the mana we need. We do have a land. What are we doing? We're not winning the game with this hand, I don't believe. So we have to mulligan this one. The lands aren't actually good. Maybe we're supposed to board out these for Ley Line of Anticipations. That makes a little bit more sense, actually. That makes a lot more sense. Wish I'd have thought of that a few minutes ago. Alright, so let's mulligan this one. So, Chromox, Imprint, put this guy. Alright, I think we keep this. Get rid of this. I don't really like having this Dread Return in hand. That is a bit of a... Maybe we have to put the Dread Return back. Some Tony Scaponi tech right there. So the plan is to Chromox, Imprint the Grief, Dark Ritual out Undercity Informer, and then be ready to go with 1 mana. If our opponent wheels us, they might wheel us into the mana that allows us to do that. A Dark Ritual from our opponent, sure. We also might be able to do like a Grief line that messes our opponent up, but it's going to be very hard for us to win with that. It's Vexing Bauble, you say. I would like to cast this Grief, this Chromox in response. And we will... So the issue here is we can't win very easily with a Vexing Bauble in play. So milling ourselves is going to be difficult to try and get back what we've got going on. So if we... How do we beat the Vexing Bauble is the question. Is our plan just to go on the beatdown now? And assume that this isn't going to happen? I think so. I think that's what we're doing. This gets us our starting black mana. So if this Narcomoeba was a black card, we would have been able to grief our opponent, potentially. 10-1, alright, Dark Ritual from our opponent. I really like Vexing Bauble in the... Ooh. They sacrificed their Vexing Bauble here. That's pretty good. So I'm going to say, the Vexing Bauble seems like it's going to be very good in the Ad Nauseam Tendrils Storm decks. Necro Dominance. This is a pretty cool one. This lets them draw a whole bunch of cards in the end step. Not familiar with this one. It's a doozy, that's for sure. How much life? Okay, they've paid 19 life. Can they kill us at instant speed? Or are they just going to have the perfect hand that kills us next turn? Which is also fine. Summoner's Pact. Interesting. Elvish Spirit Guide. So pitched off 2 Elvish Spirit Guides here. Maybe we can get a sneaky win with this grief. A Manamorphose. I think we let them get this. We can't stop them having this Manamorphose resolving. We may as well try and take a card out of their hand using our grief. Yeah, the Vexing Bauble that you can then sack to Beseech the Mirror is also pretty tasty. We've got black and a blue. And a green. A Cabal Ritual. So this is going to take them up to 4 mana. I think this is where we grief them. The power of Leyland of Anticipation. Oh, there's a Simian Spirit Guide there as well. Our opponents should be able to win with whatever they've got going on. They've got all the cards you can possibly imagine. Have they got a Veil? They might have Veil of Summer. And Nature's Claim on their own Necro Dominance. That's interesting. Is there something that they need to pay life for? Or is there some sort of storm kill? Born Upon a Wind. You may cast spells this turn as though they had flash. Foundation Breaker, Cabal Ritual. Beseech the Mirror is the only thing I really want to take here, I think. They can Valakut Awakening. And draw a whole bunch of cards. Beseech the Mirror will definitely win the game, so we have to take that. Can they actually do this? They cast this Manamorphose, which gives them black. So if we take the Manamorphose here, they can't get black. Oh, they've got this Cabal Ritual coming up, haven't they? Sorry, the Cabal Ritual's on the stack. So if we take the Manamorphose, that doesn't really do anything. I think we have to take the Beseech the Mirror and they have to spin into Valakut Awakening and hope for the best. Alright. Alright, we are hands off now. Born Upon a Wind also cantrips, right? Yeah. So that does give them more looks at stuff. Our opponent's deck is pretty cool. Manamorphose. Valakut Awakening. Alright, so we're spinning that wheel. So they put a bunch of cards from their hand onto the bottom of the library and draw that many cards +1. Now the thing is, they've got a lot of cards in hand, so they're going to be able to see like 10 cards here. They want. Okay, they're putting them all on the bottom, so they're going to draw 10. Or 12, sorry, it's +1, not -1. A Vexing Bauble. So our opponent still has a Summoner's Pact. Alright, so there's the Tendrils. That's the one. Okay, so now we are on the play. These ley lines do not seem good. Obviously. I like the Thoughtseizes. I don't think we need to do like Barrow-Goyf stuff here. The Dancing Voidwalker does seem quite nice still though. How much space does this leave us with? It's a few spaces. So a couple of Entombs helps our reliability to go off on turn 1. Are we just redeploying our game 1 deck rather than worrying about this sort of stuff? We can keep the ley lines in if we want to. Have something like this and have 1 Animate Dead. So we've still got some options. Do I think our opponent can beat Leyline of the Void? Leyline of Sanctity. We didn't see... Did we see Burning Wish? I don't think we saw Burning Wish. Maybe they can't beat it. But we want to win the game before that happens though. So are we supposed to just sack this off entirely and just have a really reliable plan on game 1? I think so. I think that we are supposed to be being reliable here. We can keep 1 in if we want, or we can have 1 Doughty Voidwalker. I like Doughty Voidwalker because it's a black card. So is Bridge from Below, but I don't think we need to do Bridge from Below things. I don't believe our opponents are going to be killing our creatures. I'm a little bit worried about our opponents having access to their own Leyline of Anticipation, because I know Tony loves it. We have the Entomb, we don't have the Reanimate, so this is a mulligan. This goes pretty hard, right? So we put this back. This, Imprint Entomb, cast Dark Ritual, play this, kill our opponent. That works. But if our opponent's got something like Mindbreak Trap, then maybe it doesn't work. So we could... Actually, do we beat Mindbreak Trap? No, there's no way we beat Mindbreak Trap. Unless we do... Pitch the land to the Chromox, grief our opponent to try and take apart their hand, and then we play Dark Ritual into Undercity Informer. Like, our opponent is a good Magic the Gathering player. They are not going to keep a hand that dies to turn 1 oops all spells, are they? So they're likely to mulligan aggressively for something. So I think the line that I just said is the better line we have. They also might start the game with a Leyline of the Void in play, which is clearly going to be a problem for us. Chancellor of the Annex has been revealed. Intriguing. So that does slow us down a touch. It means we have to play this one out. Would I like to pay through life? Yes. So I think this means we're going to be doing our grief this turn, and we can pay for the grief. And then any card basically next turn allows us to Chromox. Let's see if we can get this Chancellor trigger gotten away with. Let's see what our opponent's working with. Chancellor of the Alex, Beseech the Mirror, Dark Ritual. So our opponent's hand doesn't do an awful lot. I think this Dark Ritual is probably the scariest thing they have going on. So take that for now. And then next turn, if we draw any card in our deck, apart from Chrome Mox, we win the game next turn. They drew a Lotus Petal. So as long as we draw any card that isn't Chrome Mox, we get to win the game. Boggart Trawler, sure. So we play this Chrome Mox out. We will imprint our Boggart Trawler. We will Dark Ritual out our Undercity Informer. And our opponent will probably scoop while we do this. Target us. Hit this. Alright, so our opponent scooped that one up. So we managed to get the win there with the useful spells. The ability to pivot into doing grief stuff feels pretty good. Like, obviously it's not a super hard pivot, but because we have reliable black mana in our deck a lot more than we used to, that makes things a touch easier to, you know, take a turn off and then go. And like I said, we could draw basically anything and be fine. We were not just all in on like Wild Cantor into Dark Ritual. All right, let's see if we can play somebody else with this deck. All right, we are into the second round with this deck. And our opening hand is not one we get to keep. Our opponent, Brian Cook, is quite likely to be doing some sort of combo things on the other side of the battlefield as well. But that's not really going to impact how we're approaching this one. So let's mulligan this one. 1 mana, 2 mana, 3 mana. So we're 1 mana shy, but we have a grief that we can do. So we've just been looking to draw 1 mana for the second turn, and we've got how many mana sources in the deck? A lot. I think this is keepable. We're going to try it. There's a big, strong possibility that we get wheeled before we get to do anything anyway. But we get to turn 1, Thoughtseize, and grief our opponent if we need to. You've got 1, 2 mana. Alright, our opponent's mulligan to 3. We just need to find like Ritual or a little bit more mana. So we need 2 more mana, not 1 more mana, sorry. I think this was a bit of a shaky keep actually. But our opponent didn't do anything on their first turn. Okay, that's pretty good. I will play this and pay 3 life. And I will Thoughtseize our opponent first. We could have Thoughtseize ourselves here, actually. That would have been a better idea. It was to take the Necro Dominance, I think. Right, then we'll pass. Yeah, if we'd have griefed our opponent and Thoughtseize ourselves, we could have just reanimated and won on the spot. So that was a bit of a speed for me. A Chrome Mox. We don't need to play that out right now, do we? If we pitch this and reanimate, what does that actually do for us? Not a lot, because that means we're then drawing to 2 mana sources. Then we pass for another turn. Yeah, we should have won this game by now. That's on me. Okay, we probably get to win. So we can grief, pitching grief. Let's see what our opponent's working with. Elvish Spirit Guide, Pact of Negation. They're not going to want to do anything with that anyway. I guess just take the Pact, it doesn't matter. We can be the one to kill our opponents. So play this out. Put this reanimate in. Dark Ritual. Cast a Balustrade Spy. Target us. Do the thing. Yield to these, we just dread return up our creature. Our opponent just wants to see our deck. Yeah, okay, so now we go to sideboarding. Our opponent might be on a similar deck to what Tony was just playing now. So what did we learn from that previous game? I think if we want to board in the Leyline of Anticipation, we're boarding out our at least some portion of our lands. So these can come out for the Leylands of Anticipation. That seems like a pretty straight swap. If we want to have this plan, if our opponent does have the hate for us, and we want this sort of plan, how do we go about fitting that in? Animate Dead is the weakest of the animation spells, so that can go. And then we're probably trimming on some amount of these sorts of things. I don't think we need Bridge from Below in this particular matchup. Just trying to make sure that we can win through a Vexing Bauble. It's cards to find. Our opponent could have Mindbreak Traps, so we do want to keep these Cabal Therapies in. We could just be boarding out more lands, but that seems a little bit sketchy if we're boarding these things in. Should be like either or. Okay, let's try it just with the plan, shall we? Of boarding out our lands and keeping these things in. We are going a little bit light on lands. We are a deck that wants to mulligan to find its pieces anyway. I think we'll try this. Well, this hand is terrible. We've got 3 cards that we don't want in our hand at any point in the game. So this is one of the easier mulligans I've ever taken. So what does this hand do? It doesn't play any spells apart from like pitching a Grief. I don't think this is it either. So we can bin both of these. We have Thoughtseizes. We're pretty cold to Vexing Bauble, but that was always going to be the case. I think we're going to keep this. I have a feeling we might be getting wheeled out anyway, so we're not going to be able to draw what we need to draw. Vault of Whispers. Elvish Spirit Guide. Another Elvish Spirit Guide. A Cabal Ritual. Is this going to be Necro Dominance? Beseech the Mirror. There isn't enough in the graveyard here to win off of a guy's will. So it's just going to be the Necro Dominance here. And they're going to draw a bunch of cards. And we're going to see if they can kill us in the end step. So they get to draw 19 cards. It's not a surprise to see people trying to jam the most powerful turn 1 stuff on the first day of early access of Modern Horizons 3. Because that's kind of where people start out. They want to do the big explosive stuff, and then you kind of work out, actually, where is the fragility in this? How do we tackle it? And then you end up slowing the format down a little bit, as a general rule. Our opponent's going to clean up. So they don't have the instant speed win, but they should be able to win the game next turn, because they're going to have 7 of the best. Now, we don't get to win on turn 1 either, because we've taken a pretty defensive hand here. Alright, our opponent's just scooping it up there. They've had enough. So now we can stop playing the Ubisoft Spells deck. It's not the most exciting thing, but I thought it was important to showcase what this deck can do. And even though we made a few little errors here and there, the power was clearly right there. And I would be very surprised to not see this deck doing reasonably well and being better than it was before. Because every now and then you see it like take down some leagues and occasionally pop up in a challenge. I think now that it's just so much more reliable and you just get to be able to have like a whole bunch of good stuff going on, I think this is going to be a thing you have to keep in the back of your mind a bit more. Also, it's not that expensive as a deck, really. There's no like reserve list style cards in here. So it's certainly something that you could see more people running. Alright, on to the next deck. Alright, so this deck is a little bit more of a speculative brew on my part. But I've been wanting to play Eldrazi Food Chain for ages, trying to work out how to make that deck work, because you have Eternal Scourge, which is a thing that goes infinite with Food Chain. So I was like, okay, how do we make this work? And I tried and I couldn't make anything work. However, Glaring Fleshraker from Modern Horizons 3 is a very good card for this. So whenever you cast a colorless spell, create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifices creature, add 1. But then also, whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, this deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this, and the Food Chain goes infinite damage to your opponent, making infinite mana as well, of colorless mana. So this means that when we're doing this sort of thing, we get infinite colorless mana, which can be used for the colorless pips for colorless specific things. So We've got some fast mana on our deck. We've got some Ancient Tombs. We've got some Eldrazi Temples. We've got some Eye of Ugins, which doesn't power out the food chain, but it does power out our Eldrazi's. We have one Ugins Labyrinth. I don't think this card is very good, but I wanted to try it out and show it off, so it's here. We've got some stuff that we can put into it. And then what we're trying to do here is use Ancient Stirrings to find our Eldrazi and sort of stitch it all together. We have a relatively good beatdown plan. Like, Thought-Knot Seer is a pretty strong Magic the Gathering card that can just solo games on its own sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes, or at least buy us enough time to get where we need to go. The card that made me excited before I even saw the Fleshraker, though, was Nulldrifter. So you've already seen this today. So this is 3 mana Evoke, Annihilator 1. When you cast a spell, draw 2 cards. So this is a card that we can pay for 3, but it sacks for 8 for food chain. So we can use this to then play like a Drowner of Truth, which is also just a land if we need it. Or we can use it to play another Nulldrifter. Or we can use it to play out like our Eternal Scourge and maybe funnel some mana into a Walking Ballista. Or maybe it can pay for a big chunk of this card. Also, this card is an interesting one. We used to run things like Once Upon a Time in Eldrazi decks. This card is similar, but different. So it's a 7 mana 6/6. When you cast it, you exile target permanent that's 1 or more colors. That's not why we're playing it, but it is a useful bit of text considering what our deck does. But the main thing is, when you reveal this card from your opening hand, if you do, look at the first upkeep, you look at the top 4 cards of your library and put one of those cards back and exile the rest. So we could exile an Eternal Scourge from those 4, which is just basically drawing a card. But we also get to like look at the top card of our library and choose what we're going to be drawing that turn. So it's kind of like Once Upon a Time where instead of drawing the card that you find, you are getting to keep this card in your hand for later. And this is another thing that can pitch into our one of Ugins Labyrinth, which again, I don't think is particularly great for Legacy, but we're going to try it today. We also have a Walking Ballista if we need to go and fetch it with Eye of Ugin because our opponent has the One Ring. We can make a massive Walking Ballista and then in our opponent's upkeep we can remove all the counters. And we've also got an Emrakul if we just want to annihilate our opponent into the dirt, which is quite a fun thing to do. So yeah, the deck is pretty simple. It's trying to do one thing. Maybe the deck needs to be more beat down and less food chain and just has that as a thing going on. Maybe we need to lean more into the food chain, I'm not sure. The mana base, we get to run Yavimaya Coast because this is a tri-land for us. It makes colorless mana and it makes the green and the blue that we're looking for. Sideboard-wise, we're keeping it simple. We've got some Dismembers to kill some creatures, some Rain on the Voids for Graveyard Hate, Vexing Bauble for all these combo decks that are trying to ruin our day, and we have some Thief of Existence, which is kind of like Skyclave Apparition, but for non-creature, non-land permanents. And instead of getting a creature back, they just get a card when it goes away. So this card seems pretty fine to me as well. And yeah, that's the deck. I'm not expecting big things from this one, to be honest. But I just want to at least put a game in this and see how it feels. So we're going to run a couple of games with this and see if we can put some wins on the board with Eldrazi Food Chain. We can keep this one, I think. This is a pretty nice looking opening hand, actually. Let's see what this can find us. We can play a Food Chain on turn 1 with this Elvish Spirit Guide. That's quite nice. And then we can play the Thought-Knot Seer on turn 2. That seems reasonable. Do we need this Spirit Guide right now? I think we need to play something on turn 1. We can't do the Nulldrifter. We've got these temples that are quite nice. I think we're going to put the Spirit Guide on top. We don't actually draw that one for the first turn, actually, do we? That is where we are playing a different deck, isn't it? Okay, so I'll play out this Ancient Tomb. So our opponent might just get to turn 1 us here. Or maybe they're like a slower Galvanic Relay style list, because I know Brian loves his Galvanic Relay. With good reason, the card is very good. But if you don't watch Brian Cook's channel, then you're missing out, because there's some great stuff on there. What is this? A Beseech the Mirror and a Pass. So I will play this Ugins Labyrinth. I will exile this guy here. We'll make some mana. Cast a Thought-Knot Seer. Let's see what our opponent's working with. Necro Dominance is probably the one that's got to go here. And then we can Nulldrifter next turn, right? 2, 4, 5, 6. It depends if we want a Food Chain away our Thought-Knot Seer. Maybe we don't. But we might just be on beatdown mode rather than fun mode with the Food Chain. We shouldn't have kept this on top. That was my bad. 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, that is That's a hell of a drug right there. This is 2, so we'll play this out as well. This is blue mana, 2 mana, 2 mana. Cast this, exile these 2. Just living the stompy life. So next turn we can Ancient Stirrings if we want to, and maybe that gives us... Okay, we might just be getting clapped out here. Is this Cabal Ritual? We've done our best. We've done our level best. But last time we played against Necrodominance, they didn't win with the cards they had. But we already know they've got a few cards to get them going, like the Mana Morphos and stuff like that. But if they don't win this turn, we get to do quite a lot of damage to our opponent and take out one of their permanents. Feels like they might have it though, because they're exiling Spirit Guides and go in here. Summoner's Pact. You go ahead. Elvish Spirit Guide. So this is going to be Mana Morphos into blue mana for Born on a Wind, and then they can play out all their spells at instant speed. Curious why our opponent added white mana. Ah, that's why. Yeah, it basically just defaulted. Our opponent had the win there. There was just like a little misclick there. So we're just going to go to sideboarding. So these Vexing Baubles seem pretty important for this matchup. I'm not really in love with any of the other things we've got going on though. Where do these Vexing Baubles get to replace things? I think we probably don't need Emrakul. If we're doing our thing, we're doing our thing right. Nulldrifter is a fine man. It's probably slightly better than Devourer on the board, but on the board isn't where the Devourer shines. We want to keep this combo in. I don't think we're worrying about the One Ring, so we're not going to have this Ballista. We've just got to find a couple of cuts here. I want to keep our big combo-y stuff, so it probably is just the Nulldrifters that go, because they're kind of like a good, fair game plan. I say fair, yeah, well, they are still fair, but you know what I mean. Our opponent is not running Graveyardy stuff by the looks of it. We've seen this Necro Dominance deck a couple of times, so we'll submit with the Baubles and see how these do for us. I would very much like to play. What is our opening hand going to consist of? An Ancient Stirrings to look for a Bauble is A-okay. The rest of our hand is pretty weak, for sure. But is 5 looks at a Bauble better? Wait, is 5 looks at a Bauble on turn 1 that we can cast off the Spirit Guide? That is almost as good as mulliganing. Maybe I should just mulligan if that's the case. So we get to see 7 cards this time. Vexing Bauble. No mana that actually casts it. That is a sad state of affairs, unfortunately. We have to mulligan this. So now we're in a very similar spot to what we were before. Do I think our opponent's going to turn 1 us? If they are... they get 7 cards, so I think they're going to turn 1 us, so we have to go deeper here. Where's the Bauble? Uh-oh. Here's the Bauble. I think this is what we have to do. So I want the Eldrazi Temple, I think, is the better of these lands. We have the Bauble, and it's probably this guy to fix for us. So we're getting rid of this, 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 and this. Or do we get rid of the Devourer and just keep more mana? That's probably better. So now we'll try the Bauble out. This might not do anything, but it might do a lot. And I think it's important to test to see how good it is to mulligan into these Baubles and stuff like that. Now, our opponent might have some answer to this, but it can't be anything like Force of Vigors, because that's a free spell. But it could be like Echoing Truth. They've got a land. We need to find an answer here. Or find something to do. We'll name Eldrazi. We don't get to play anything. We're not cracking this Bauble. We need this Bauble. Okay, we might just be staring at each other for a little bit here. Drowner of Truth. I will play Drowned Jungle. This allows us to play out our food chain as well as cast 4-drops like Thought Not Seer. Okay. Eternal Scourge. We'll just play you out right now, I think. Okay. So we will be spending mana on the Bauble. When we do our loop, we are generating mana. So they could have like Dark Rituals here. Beseech, when you get the card, if you bargain it, you can't win with the bargained card. Because you can't cast it. You can put it into your hand and then cast it if you've got the mana going. Right, our opponent's adding 5 to their pool. They're playing this out for Storm into our Vexing Bauble. There's a Necro Dominance. Okay, so they're just generating Storm, so it's going to be slightly easier for them to combo off in the end step, is the theory. Assuming Spirit Guides and stuff, pretty good into the Vexing Bauble. Okay, there's 2 unspent mana there. Our opponent has a choice of how much life they pay here. They can take a bunch so they're not dead, so they get 1 more turn. Or they could just go really deep and hope they can combo off. I think they probably just want to like take 15 life or something like that and give themselves a little bit of wiggle room. I know they've gone to 1, so they're going to try and win. Obviously, they know what's in their deck far better than I do. I've not really seen these Necro Dominance lists apart from when they've been smashing us. Or not necessarily always smashing us, but jamming into us into this little early access period. There is a Manamorphose. We can F6 this turn. I don't think our Vexing Bauble drawing a card is going to be the difference here. I think it's going to be far better in play considering we don't have anything to draw. That's Born Upon a Wind, so now they can cast everything at instant speed, but they can't cast any free spells. So maybe the Vexing Bauble is going to do the work for us. Alright, it did do the work for us. So now we've sort of seen Vexing Bauble as a defensive and an offensive card so far in today's video, which is pretty cool. We don't really have anything better than what we've got. You could argue that we could play the Thief of Existence over the Nulldrifter. Do I like that? Nulldrifter is an easy way to jump the curve mana-wise. I don't think the way our opponent's deck looks like it's constructed, I don't think this Thief of Existence is going to do anything. So it's going to go in again. Like, they do play some stuff out of the board sometimes, but they're trying to kill us pretty sharpish. See if they get the turn 1. This card does not do anything. No, sorry, this hand does not do anything. So we have Ancient Stirrings. That's a lot of looks. I think this is keepable. So we want this. So, or we could use this to cast this. We want to do this as well. I think we have to put back the Food Chain and then rely on the Thought-Knot Seer to do some lifting. But we can... Are we Spirit Guiding or are we Tropical Islanding? Our opponent's mulligan to 3. I guess the setup of their deck is kind of, they have to have access to Necro Dominance. They can get access to it via Beseech the Mirror as well. Gemstone Mine from our opponent. And it's over to us. So we have to make a decision now about how we're making the mana for... So we now have a 2-drop we can play. But if we want to... If we want to play the Thought-Knot Seer on 2, we have to use a Spirit Guide here. So I think that's what we're going to do. Let's see if we can find what we're looking for. I love Ancient Stone. I think it's a really sweet card. Eternal Scourge is pretty good with the Flesh Raker. That just leaves us 1 card away from our combo. So I guess we're going to do that. I just go in any order. It doesn't really matter. And then, is this better than... I think this is better than the Eldrazi Temple. So we need our opponent not to kill us this turn. So we can at least have a peek with the Thought-Knot Seer. Considering the amount of cards they have, it might be difficult. But again, they could just have land, Cabal Writ, Necro Dominance, and that's pretty strong. Drowner of Truth. So now we play out the Temple. We just get old school Stompion. We get to take a peek at our opponent's hand. I'll take the Beseech the Mirror and pass. If we have the Food Chain, we can win. If we draw the Food Chain next turn, we can win the game. We drew the Food Chain. We get to do the thing. That's very exciting. So we can play this Food Chain. We can exile this. They get to draw a card. We get to play this Eternal Scourge. And we can exile this guy. And then we can cast this guy. Then we can cast this Eternal Scourge. And we've assembled our infinite Food Chain combo. On turn 3. Alright, so we managed to do the thing with our deck. That was nice. We basically won this match because we got bodied pretty hard, but then we also just won off of Vexing Bauble. So you're already seeing how it's such an important card for sideboarding stuff. Alright, let's go to another match with this deck. Alright, we are on the play. What does our opening hand do? We have this land that I don't like that looks bad, so that's not a good start. I think we can do better. This is a turn 2 Flesh Raker, turn 3 Thought-Knot Seer. I don't think we want that. I think we want something a little bit more... Not like this either. Oh dear, not like this. Okay. Yes, I'll keep this. So, we have a green source for our... How many cards have we got to put? 2. So I kind of like this one to set up our draws. Although if we're casting Ancient Stirrings, maybe we don't really want to be setting up our draws that much. So maybe this one goes. And then... Are we doing food chain stuff? Maybe we can bin off the Drowner of Truth? That seems a little sketchy though, doesn't it? Maybe it's the food... No, the food chain's a harder thing to find though, because we have Ancient Stirrings that digs into these. If we cast Elvish Spirit for this, we're almost certainly just getting a land anyway. If we keep this, we have a little bit of flexibility. Maybe it's the Scourge that goes. This is a really tough call. This would have been a good 6. But on a 5, it's really annoying. We could slow things down and just start with the Drowner of Truth. And get rid of... No, I can't really get rid of the Spirit Guide. Yeah, this is a really tough hand. I think we'll get rid of the Scourge because it's the harder part to find. And we you know, we want to see people getting killed by what we're doing. Oh, our opponent's on the same thing. Okay. So I will cast this using this. Now, Eldrazi Temple is very nice, but so is an Ancient Tomb here. I think we get the Ancient Tomb and play it. Because this can add 2 mana for the food chain as well as our Eldrazi. Alright, we might be on a mirror match here. Not something I was expecting with the old Eldrazi food chain, but here we are. I know, I think it was Nosman was building something similar to what we've got. There was a little bit of difference between our lists, but there's definitely some people out there working on it. We don't get to know what the card is. Do we get to see the cards in the Exile Zone? We do. Alright, so they're on a red build with more stompy action. With Wastelands as well. Oh dear. This could be a problem for us. I think we play that out so we have a chance of playing the Thornar's Seer next turn. But we could play out the Drowning to get the tap land out of the way. But our Eldrazi Temple doesn't tap for 2. I suppose the thing that could punish us if we draw a 3-drop Eldrazi. If we do it this way around. But I'm kind of hoping to draw a land that taps for 2. Just get the big boy in. So I imagine the red Eldrazi our opponent wants to play is the one that gives a creature haste and plus X plus O, where X is the number of Eldrazi you have. I think that's probably where they're at. It that heralds the end. Sure. So this makes their more expensive Eldrazi cheaper and pumps them. What does this do? Nothing for us. I think we play this. And then next turn we can have the Thornar's Seer. So we weren't actually punished for the play we made last turn. Like, there are definitely ways that we could have had a bad time, but we might be getting... Okay, we're not getting Thornar's Seered pre-combat. Maybe get Thornar's Seered post-combat? No Reality Smasher, because they need 5 mana for this, and this only reduces 7 drops. Alright, we are getting Thornar's Seered post-combat. Yikes. I've taken off Food Chain rather than the Thornar's Seer. But what this does mean is that because they've got the Lord, they're going to have slightly bigger Eldrazi than us, which is a huge deal here. This card, which I said looked bad, is looking bad. So that's fine. That's for 2. And get ourselves a Thought Not Seer and see what our opponent's working with over there. Chalice of the Void and Devourer of Destiny. Neither of these cards are actually great. Because Devourer of Destiny does not kill our stuff because it's 1 or more colours. So the only thing it can kill is a food chain, and we're probably not playing food chain until we win. But yeah, this is bad news. Our opponent gets to crash for 5. They've also got Urza's Saga in their deck. And Wastelands. There's a lot going on there from our opponent. There is the Saga. Thornar's Seer. Have a look at our terrible card. Now if we can kill that Thornar's Seer, we can get a card. For free, because we didn't lose anything. But I think our opponent is ahead. For sure here. Ooh, okay. This isn't the one right now, but it could be soon. So we'll tap this. And this. This gives us the ability to... I think we just play this land out as well. It still taps on 1 colourless. So this gives us the ability to maybe draw into some chump blockers. But we're going to take a lot of damage this turn. And if they've got like Shadow Spear type stuff, that's going to be pretty problematic for us. How are we going to get around this? This It that Heralds the End, or whatever it's called, is really doing what its name says. Making their guys bigger than us in the mirror is a lot. So we could double block here and lose... what do we lose if we double block here? What would our opponent take? The Thought-Knot gets them a card. We could take 10 and go to 3. If this has got a Shadow Spear in it, we will just lose the game to it. So I think we do have to block here. I hate this. I feel very vulnerable. The Lord in the Mirror is strong. Okay, so we're going to trade cards here. Okay, this is good because we get to actually keep the creature I wanted to keep most. That guy is big. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He is too big. But if we can draw an Eldrazi Temple or an Ancient Tomb or an Eye of Ugin, that gives us this guy. He's not going to get to exile or anything, but it's the biggest thing on the board, and it's also going to make us a little friend of the Fleshraker. Oh, Wasteland. Okay, so we're definitely not casting this Devourer of Destiny if our opponent wants to fire this off. And they do. Okay, so we need to find... like, another Fleshraker would be okay. And then we can draw some more Fleshrakers. And just keep making lots and lots of little guys. And Eldrazi Temple. So we would have got there. I guess we have to keep back the Raker on blocks. So our opponent's on a red-green build. Withers, a Saga and stuff. I wonder how they fitted all these things in. They're probably not running this awful Ugin's Labyrinth card. Probably the start. So, there's a Saga. Make a guy. Are we going to get a Shadow Spear here? I don't think we beat the Shadow Spear and we can just scoop it up. Lava Spur Boots. That's also pretty good. So this is... we can block this and we take 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, we are very cooked here. Yeah, our mulligan was a little bit unfortunate, but our opponent had our number. So I think we need some Dismembers. And I think the Thief of Existence might be okay here. Things like Lava Spur Boots can be annoying. So these are things I'm interested in. But is that worthwhile still? So we could keep the Walking Ballista and try and ping down their Lord. But I think I'd rather have a Dismember to kill their Lord. Do we need Emrakul in our deck? That is an important question. Our opponent's got Wastelands. We're only casting Emrakul when we're comboing. And hopefully if we're comboing, we're winning the game anyway. But that's not always the case. I don't think we can afford these Thieves. We've currently got 1 Dismember in. If we want these other 2 Dismembers, we're going to have to find cuts. And I don't know if we can cut, but we have to, really, because the Dismembers are so clutch here. So maybe it is the Emrakul. And then we need to trim one other thing. I like the Nulldrifters a lot here. Maybe it's a Devourer of Destiny. I can set up our turn 1, but we're on the draw, so it's not as good. Sorry, we're on the play, so it's not as good because we don't get to draw that card immediately. This could be infinite mana on turn 2. Potentially. Is that good enough? We get to look at 4 cards. I think I'm going to try it. I'm not convinced, but I want to see how useful the selection on this is. And infinite mana can go a long way, and we can, you know, play a big guy that will hold the fort. I'm not sure if our opponent has an infinite combo in their deck. They might just be on, you know, a fair stompy deck. Let's have a look at our library. There is a food chain. So we have infinite mana on turn 2. So I'll put this food chain on top. And then we'll play this out. Do we play this one out? No, we play this one out so we protect our... well, we know they've got Wastelands is the problem. I was going to say we could protect this in our hand, but they have Wastelands, so I don't really want to do that. I think we'll play this. And we'll just cast this guy straight up. So next turn we can make infinite mana. We don't really have anything to do with it just yet, but it's a start. And then on the next turn we can cast this Devourer. We can play the Ugin's Labyrinth next turn if we want to, as long as we're not tapping it. But that means we don't play the food chain, and that seems like an error. I think we need to play the Yavimaya, get the food chain out, and then we can start combo in. So we just need something to go with this, and we can win. It the Herald's the End, sure. Certainly better than Eldrazi Mimic. That card never impressed me. Okay, we'll get this Yavimai's Cradle out. So the problem here is this requires colorless, colorless. And we don't have colorless, colorless. Because this doesn't make the mana. But we can attack our opponent. Next turn we can, because we can use the colorless for this, and then we can just make the mana off of the Scourge. But if we get Thought-Knot Seared, we lose our Devourer of Destiny. But we could draw like the Fleshraker, we could draw an Ancient Stirrings, which would let us dig and hopefully find what we need. A Glaring Fleshraker. Maybe they are on the combo as well. They're just in a red-green package instead of the blue-green package. Alright, so they're playing this as a 1-1, which is going to become a 2-2 and give them a Fleshraker token. Okay, I need to play my own Fleshraker, because this is going to beat us. Cavern of Souls. That doesn't do it. So let's make some mana. Sacrificing this. Replaying this. We do this a few times until we've got the mana we require. And now we can cast this guy. Oh wait, we have to exile our own permanent. That's pretty bad, isn't it? I didn't realise that was the case. That is a good interaction to learn. But I think we do need the body in play, because we're just going to lose to the beatdown if we just, like, maybe we draw the card next turn and win the game. But we're on 10 life. So we do need to put up some kind of defense. So I think we're still doing this, even though it costs us our food chain. I still think this is the right play to make. It just feels a bit sad. Alright, so they got a Wasteland over there. Goodbye, Ancient Tomb. They're playing another Fleshraker. This is going to be problematic, for sure, because that's putting us to 8 already. Now, them attacking doesn't feel the best for them. But they don't need to attack, and we can't attack either. But yeah, if we didn't play this out, we would have lost the game. I suppose we play out this Temple. Could have held off one turn on this. I didn't realise it was both can target opponent you control and is also not me. That was definitely my bad. But this has saved us at least 7 damage. Yeah, they could have killed us last turn potentially, because they can cast an Endless One for 1 and just ping us for 2. So yeah, they could have had us lethal if we didn't have this. But how do we win this game now? Because this is going to come into play and ping us to 2. They turn everything sideways and we lose. Yep. Right, that's the end of that. We got smashed up there. So this deck was okay. You can see our opponent in the last round was doing something very similar, which is quite exciting. But what the actual best build of this looks like, I don't know. But it felt more robust than I thought it was going to be honest. I think Ancient Stirrings is a very good card in this deck. I love the selection of this. This is the sort of selection that you wouldn't normally expect to see in a deck like this. We are giving up playing Chalice of the Void in order to do that, which is one of the better things you can do off Ancient Tombs. But I'm certainly down for some Ancient Stirrings action. I think if we're trying to do a combo, that's kind of essential. So we went 1-1 with this deck. We went 2-0 with Oops All Spells, I think. And then we went 1-1 with the Blue-White Dreadnought deck. So not a bad showing for our first delve into the new Legacy format. Join me tomorrow and we're going to have some more of it. Alright, thank you so much for watching and goodbye. If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget turbo depths as well as 3 tiers of support. A low cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel. A mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed turbo depths guide that is updated every month as well as regular articles. And lastly, the higher tier gives you all of the above, as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.